First thing is Yishakochem to you. It was a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful tefillah. Shkoyach mamash. You can even clap if you want. No, really Yishakochem. It's I just say a couple of words, and then the person who literally wrote the book on Tefilla, or the books on Tefilla, we'll have this chus of hearing from Rabbi Bick. Just a couple of words. My son asked me just now after davening, like, Mehechi Teisi, like what's the middle of Teves? What's so the needs are suddenly to have like such a tefillah with such koach, so suddenly push tefillah with koach in the middle of Teves, and the answer is that's the point. That's exactly the point. The point is in the middle of Teves when it's not Shabbos, it's not Yom Tov. It's hard for me to say this. The war is being somewhat normalized in our experience. It's still terrible, terrible things and terrible news coming out. There's still terrible realities continuing, but still, somehow we've been living with it. It's not necessarily made teshuvah. Dafka in normal times, we have to work on raising the base level. That's exactly the yesod of doing this in the middle of Teves where nothing else is happening. Raising the base level of what davening looks like for each and every one of us, and davening looks like as a kehillah, to daven with more energy, to become the type of people that the daily, day in, day out, normal experience of our lives is one in which we feel that today I woke up and I spoke to Kodesh Baruch Hu, and this afternoon I'm going to speak to him again, and then nighttime I'm going to speak to him again. I'm a type of person in constant contact and conversation with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. He's part of my life. Everything I do is a product, is a continuation of the tefillah in the morning and before the tefillah in mincha, and I always have something to off-burden and to put and to share with the Kodesh Baruch Hu. Raising the baseline of our religious experience, putting on the sham on a higher plane, that's exactly the point. To create a norm which is a higher level norm. And then when there are times when there's a eight Sarah Li'akov, when there are times when it's a Seisei Teshuvah, when there are times in the Shabbos or Yom Tov, that the baseline has been raised to a higher plane, and the muscles of tefillah, our ability to daven, how comfortable it is, how pashut it is for us to daven is so much stronger that we can turn to a Kodesh Baruch Hu and take it even further. The closer a person feels to Kodesh Baruch Hu day in, day out, so the more real his tefillah becomes day in, day out, and at the times of need, it becomes even stronger. I'll share, I'm going to carry on talking till Bick comes. I'll share just an anecdote just this week, and I've seen it over and over again. Two chayalim in exactly the same plugdah, they're mamash working side by side. People have different experiences, different impacts of being in the army on their avodas Hashem. And one spoke to me about how the army has been a very, very negative experience on his avodas Hashem. It's hard for him to daven, it's hard for him to toast to Kodesh Baruch Hu, the stress, the pressure, the constant movement, the constant difficulty, it's very, very hard on him. And I spoke to him about it at length. And the second guy came to me, again, he mamash worked side by side with this chayal about how there's never had a high in his avodas Hashem. Tefillah has never been more powerful, more deep and real, and feeling like HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence is every moment. And I discussed with him that at length. If you asked me a year ago, could I predict that distinction? I think I probably could have. I wouldn't want to have predicted that distinction. One of them has been working on his tefillah for the last few years, and therefore he had a strong base which he was able to take to a higher plane. And the other was a little bit parav. And so when he was challenged, he didn't really have the toolkit to daven to a higher plane. That's the goal of this week. The goal of this week is on an individual level. It's very important on an individual level to think just about your own tefillah. How can I take myself to a higher plane? The second, what I wrote in the chat, is this is a communal thing. We dance together, we cry together, we sing together, we learn together, we're a kehillah. Being part of a kehillah means also davening together, creating a context in which we daven, which the davening is powerful. You don't just daven b'tzibur in order to be yotzi yachiv of davening b'tzibur, because if that's all you do, so daven in the yeshiva, davening in the local minyan, daven wherever you like, switch a different minyan every day. But if you're part of a kehillah and you understand this is your kehillah, so you'll always want to daven with the same kehillah, And then that Tefillas davening will be taken itself to a higher base level, and that's part of the goal we're trying to achieve today. Okay, it says big zechus to have Rabbi Bick to share ideas on Tefillah. The person who wrote the books on the subject.
There are 3 or 4 places in Maseches Brachos where Rashi, specifically Rashi, defines davening, defines Shmonesrei as ka'omed lifnei hamelech. There's no explicit place in the Gemara, I emphasize the word explicit, where the Gemara says that. But Rashi all the time uses the expression, and from there, if you look in the Achronim, it's used all the time to explain halachos. For instance, the Beis Yosef explains that why do you have to stand? You say Shemona Esrei. So the Beis Yosef says that it's learned from Kohanim. Kohanim have to stand and do avoda because it says Lamod u'lishaves, and the Mispalel is Omed Lifnei HaMelech. He's doing that. He's being makriv in the Beis Hamikdash. It's the same as the Kohen being makriv in the Beis Hamikdash. The Makar, I think, is the Gemara. The real Makar is the Gemara in Yevamos, Daf Kofei. Admittedly, a strange place to learn about Hilchos Tefillah. First of all, it's Yevamos. Second of all, it's Daf Kofei. Who gets to Daf Kofei when they learn Yeshiva? If you're lucky, not in this Yeshiva where we don't learn Yevamos, but if you'd be learning Yevamos in a Yeshiva, so you'd learn the first 20 Daf. Daf Kofei and Yevamos is a very important Gemara about Tefillah. And this is what the Gemara says. Rav Chia Rabbi Shimon Barav Havo Yatfi. In the continuation of the Gemara, it turns out that they were sitting outside. Everybody, this is not a Musa Shmuz, so you have to learn your own Musa. They were sitting outside the Beis Medrash waiting for the shir to begin. In the meantime, they were shmoozing, because that's what Yeshiva Bachim do before the shir begins. What were they shmoozing about? They were shmoozing about Tefillah, not about the latest scores in the NFL. Patach chad minay v'amar hamispalel tzarich sheyitein einav lemata shenemar vayu einai v'libi sham kol hayamim. When you daven, you should look down because of a pasuk. It's a difficult pasuk to understand what the connection is. Maybe I'll make a small comment about that. Vayu einai v'libi sham kol hayamim. The Kodesh Baruch Hu is talking about the Beis Hamikdash. He's talking to Shlomo HaMelech, and he says, "You build the Beis Hamikdash, people will go there to daven. They'll go there to daven because v'hayu einai shel Hashem v'libi sham kol hayamim. V'chad amar einav lemala. You daven, you should look up. Shenema nisa levavenu el kapayim. This you understand better. It's talking about the people who are davening. Nisa levavenu el kapayim. When you daven, you uplift. You put your heart in your hands and lift it up. Doesn't say anything about your eyes. Presumably, if you're lifting something up, you're also looking up. The tefillah is mechuvan up. The first day was the tefillah is mechuvan. You have to understand it. Mechuvan down. Before we continue the Gemara, the same 2 psukim, to understand this Gemara, the same psukim were brought in Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. It's Machlokas in Rosh Hashanah about whether or not, Machlokas halacha l'maisa. We all know the answer, but it's Machlokas halacha l'maisa of Tanoim. Should the shofar of Rosh Hashanah be curved or straight? And the Gemara explains that the Machlokas is whether or not Tefillah, Rashi explains it's going on Tefillah, where the Tefillah in Rosh Hashanah is curved, called ma dekayef inish ma litvei. A person bends himself more, is a better Tefillah, or kol ma de zakif inish ma litvei. A person davens erect. And the Gemara and Rashi there quotes 2 psukim to explain those 2 dayos. The 2 psukim Rashi quotes are Shvahayu libi einai v'libi sham kol hayamim. That's called the kayif inish nafshei tvei. And the pasuk Nisa Leveinu El Kapayim is called Madazakif Inish. So you see that the psukim, Rashi interprets it automatically that the psukim are talking about tefillah, but he tells you what it means. To look down is the kayif inish. Person davens before Kadosh Baruch Hu, so he's mikofefet atzmo. He bends himself. It doesn't mean to break yourself, but it means you shrivel up. You're instinctively retracting. You're instinctively pulling yourself into yourself or bending down. And Nisa Leveinu El Kapayim doesn't just mean you want to fly. It means zakif inish. It's a stature of a person's greatness. The Gemara in Yevamos, I go back to it, continues as follows. One of the great Tanoim, Rabbi Shmuel bar Yossi, came to shir. He came a little bit later than they. Amalu b'maya sikto. What are you talking about? Apparently he was the mashgiach. He wanted to know what they were talking about before shir. So they said to him, Amulei b'tefila. And they explained to him what the machlokas was. Amalahu kach amar Abba, Rabbi Yossi said, HaMispaler tzarech sheyitav einav lemata v'libo lemala. He says you do both. Your eyes should be facing the ground, nifsak lahalacha, but libo lemaila. So by you, einai v'libo sham kol hayamim, we do with our eyes, but nisa levavenu, it's the better pshat in the psukim. Nisa levavenu el kapayim. So we should. That means the original day was you should look up. He says no, you should look down, but libo lemala, shenema nisa leveinu el kapayim. What does it mean, libo lemala? Ein of lemata, we know what it means. You should look down. I understand that. On that, there's a deep meaning behind it. But halacha lemaisa, I understand what the Gemara is saying. What does it mean, halacha lemaisa? V'libo b'shamayim. What do you do? What's the halacha? How's it nifsak in Shulchan Aruch? So the Rambam says the following: Perekei halacha dalid. Tikkun haguf keitzad. The Rambam in Perekei Avichos Tefilla lists 8 halachas, which are lechatchila but not ma'akev, how you daven. The first one is amida. Very important halacha. That's where the name of Shemoneh Esrei comes from. There are many other halachas. One of them is tikkun haguf. What is tikkun haguf? Keitzad. Kishu omeid b'tefila tzarech lechavein es raglav zu b'tzad zu. V'nosein einav lemata. Ke'ilu hu mabit la'aretz. Why does Rabbi say ke'ilu? Nothing to do with what I'm talking about, but I can't skip over the line. Rabbi says the Gemara said you should look down. Rabbi says yitain einav lemata ke'ilu hu mabit la'aretz. Why is it ke'ilu? If you look down, you're mabit la'aretz. Why is it ke'ilu? Because your eyes are closed, of course. They didn't have Sidurim. Sidurim didn't exist yet. Because in Rambam's time, Sidurim existed, but very few. They were davening by heart, so your eyes are closed. But you look down anyhow. Ke'ilu hu mabit ba'aretz. V'yiyeh libo panoi lemala ke'ilu hu omeid b'shamayim. The Rambam explains that libo lemala means that you see yourself as omeid b'shamayim. Doesn't mean that you aspire. You libo lemala, I want to fly. Okay, Nisa levaveinu el kapayim. I'm moving up. It says Nisa levaveinu el kapayim because your entire body, everything about your entire existence is omeid b'shamayim. That's the definition, halacha lemaisa of tefillah. Nachon lechatchila velo b'diavad. If you can't, I'm explaining halacha aleph. If you're sick, you can't stand. You're on an airplane, you can't stand, so you can daven sitting down. You yotze b'diavad. But the din of tefillah, the chiyuv of tefillah, is ba'amida and tikkun and kibun hamakam and tikkun haguf and tikkun hamalbush. One of them is tikkun haguf. Tikkun haguf is your body. It's not about your soul. Your body is ke'iluhu omeid lemala. Very important expression. That's tikkun haguf. Tikkun haguf. Okay, your eyes are tikkun haguf. You're looking down. The Rambam. I'll continue reading the rest of the Rambam. What else is included in tikkun haguf? Computer, come back. V'meniach yodav alibo kefutin hayamanit ala smolit. This is nipsak halacha l'mais and Shulchan Aruch. Nobody does it. I don't know why. But it's quoted in the Mechaber from the Rambam that when you daven, it's based on a story in the Gemara. It's not based on a maimon in the Gemara. There's always a problem in the Rambam. The Rambam decides when to quote stories in the Gemara halacha and when not. Maybe he quotes it halacha. You're supposed to daven like this: yodav kefutin, kefutin. Arrested, tied up. You should close your hands The idea explained by Rabbi is that I'm not going to do things now. I feel helpless. I'm tying myself up. You yodav kefutin lamala alibo. Yemanis ala smalit. I mentioned that because it's here. Rama is defining your body. The din in your body is ke'omed yira atzmo ke'omed lemala b'shamayim. That means not that you should be thinking about heaven. You should transport mentally. You should transport mentally your body. Your body is omed b'shamayim. I think this is the makkah for the explanation of Rashi, which explains in Gemaras, but only the muzim in the Gemaras and brachas. I don't quote them all. That when you're davening, the person is omed lifnei hamelech. And why omed lifnei hamelech? Because you can be omed lifnei Hashem maybe here. If Kadosh Baruch Hu comes to visit you here, then you'll be omed lifnei Hashem. If Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't come to visit you here, Shmoneh is an invitation to enter the royal court and to omed lifnei hamelech. The truth is, it's a pasuk mefurash. Avram tikei tefilla shachris. The first tefillah that's a din, the first tefillah that's avodas Hashem yomit. Avram tikei tefilla shachris, because it says, v'hu omed sham b'makom asher amad sham et Elokim. Avram Avinu in the morning after storm, in the morning before storm, it says, v'hu omed lifnei Elokim v'yigash v'yomer. It says there also omed lifnei Hashem. When the Malachim left, Avraham Avinu accompanied them to an undisclosed point, which later on we'll find out is overlooking Sdom. Chazal said it was also, Bamakom was also in Har Moriah, but it says it was Omed Lifnei Hashem Vayigash. He went to daven. The next morning it says he came back to the same place, Makam Asher Amad Sham Et HaElokim. Et HaElokim means im. The word et means im. Hashem explain all the time. Et means im. The reason why you use et instead of im is that you could be im. Ani imchem achshav. But itchem, it implies a stronger, a direct connection. But it's explicit in the extension. I don't know if I quoted it right. I'm quoting it right now. Et pnei Elokim. I didn't say the word pnei. Who omed et makom asher amad sham et pnei Elokim. What is et pnei? Pnei is mul. Pnei Elokim means person facing a person. Et pnei implies, in the picture, mamash chavukim, not together with. If we're both facing the same direction, anigam itcha. If we're going to do something, then community, being together, means we both face the same direction. But et pnei Elokim means with the face of God, means with the mul Elokim. In other words, it's a direct confrontation or a direct communion of Hashem im with Avraham Avinu. So this is nifsak lahalacha, that mispalel is omed lifnei Elokim. The Rambam adds an important word, bashamayim. Bashamayim. If just to complete the Rambam, the previous halacha in the Rambam was a different halacha. It was a halacha of nochach hamikdash. Again, the Rambam says nochach hamikdash is one of the halachas, which is l'chatchila. If you can't do it, you don't do it. You don't know where the mikdash is. You don't have your little compass in your smartphone, so you can daven. You'll be yotzei without it, but it's l'chatchila. Unusually, the Rambam says that nochach hamikdash is the oraisa. As we know, the Rambam thinks that tefillah is the oraisa, as opposed to almost all of the Rishonim. And from the pasuk of avatem ve'ezu avod asher balev havei omer zot tefillah. Then the Rambam says in halacha bet, halach perek aleph halacha bet, what do? What does tefillah consist of? B'dioraisa. It says you say anything you want. Once a day, you say, you daven before Kadosh Baruch Hu, you make up the words, but two halachas d'oraisa. One halacha d'oraisa is shevach bakasha and shevach ba'odaya, the basic structure of Shemot Esrei. That's the oraisa, which we learn from a pasuk. This we know what the pasuk is. V'atchanan Hashem beitahi lemor Hashem Elokim atay yorta davod avdachat kotecha b'tefachah. From Moshe Rabbeinu, then when he davened in Parshas V'eschanan, he opened up. It looks, when you realize that if you didn't know it was halacha, you'd be very surprised. What he butters up God before he has a particular request. What did he say? You have to tell that he's God. So we learn from a thing. But the second halacha says the Yisrael says nochach hamikdash. But he also says he doesn't know where it comes from. Where does it say in the Torah that you have to daven nochach hamikdash? It can't say it in the Torah, really. because there's no Beis HaMikdash. There's no Beis HaMikdash yet. So where the Torah would have said that you have to daven Nochach HaMikdash. So they talk about where could possibly be the marker, but the Rambam says it's the Yoraisa. When he defines Nochach HaMikdash, the Rambam says as follows. In Halacha Gimel, it's the previous Halacha from what I quoted before. Suma, he says you have to daven to Nochach HaMikdash. He explains what the Gemara says, that if you're outside of Eretz Yisrael, you face Eretz Yisrael. If you're in Eretz Yisrael, you face Yerushalayim. If you're in Yerushalayim, you face the Mikdash. And if you're in the Mikdash, you face Kachei Kachim. And the Rambam says, Suma, u'mishaloi yidei lechaben es aruchos. U'mahalech b'sfina. You don't know the right direction. So in our gifts in the Gemara, it says, Yechaven libo lebeis HaMikdash. You mentally face the Beit HaMikdash. The Rambam says, Yechaven libo kineged hashchina v'yispalel. So it's a different halacha, but from the Rambam you see, the Rambam thinks that even the halacha of Nochach HaMikdash is Nochach HaShchina, because the Shchina is B'Mikdash. So if you can't face the Mikdash, so why bother being B'chaven libo el HaMikdash, Yechaven libo el HaShchina. So this, and then the next halacha is, Tikun Haguf Ketzad, is Einav Lamata v'libo lemala. Einav Lamata v'libo lemala, it sounds like a contradiction, which the Gemara says, we kind of both psukim. Originally it was a stira, it was a machloket. And Rabbi Yossi says, Mekayim et shneim. So okay, you do a pshara between two things. It's not a pshara. The pshat is the same pshat. Omed lifnei hashchina, we've been taught, it's very, and it was good that we were taught this in first grade. Kadosh Baruch Hu listens to Tefilla. So a person who has something to say, the Kadosh Baruch Hu will hear him. Of course Kadosh Baruch Hu will hear him. Kadosh Baruch Hu has very good ears. So if I stand in this room and I whisper, Kadosh Baruch Hu will hear. That's why we daven b'sheket. You daven b'shtika. Kadosh Baruch Hu has very, very good ears to hear you anyhow. But the Gemara says that that's not what Tefilla is. You communicate with the Kadosh Baruch Hu if you're walking in the street and all of a sudden you have a problem. If you're walking in the street and you fall off a cliff and you're falling down, so in the middle you should scream or whisper, Kadosh Baruch Hu save me, he'll hear you. That's not Tefillah. It's called Za'aka. That's Kadosh Baruch Hu will always hear you when you call out to him. B'chol makom, b'chol eita, b'chol zman. That doesn't follow the rules. The rules of Tefillah, what we call Shachris, Mincha, Ma'ariv, Avodas Hashem, is not that Kadosh Baruch Hu hears you from afar, because he's Bashamayim and you're Ba'aretz, and you can always communicate. You can bridge that gap. You don't even have to scream, even though it's called Za'aka. But Tefillah is Omed Lifnei HaMelech. It's Yir'eh Atzmo Ka'omed Bashamayim. It's literally a nes. It's literally a nes. It's not a physical nes, it's a metaphysical nes. But we're saying that the person is Bashamayim, which is impossible, because the distance between Shamayim and Ba'aretz is infinite. An amazing Gemara in Sukkah, which I think in our neo-Hasidic education in elementary school is always eliminated. May olam lo yarat shchina al haaretz, u'mei olam lo olam lo Moshe Rabbeinu v'lo Eliyahu el hashamayim. Against often a psukim, the pasuk says Moshe Allah el Elohim, and it says Eliyahu Allah la shamayim. The Gemara answers the kasha. The Gemara says pachot miyud tfachim. Gives a lam nesheteretz. Moshe Rabbeinu got to the shamayim yud tfachim. What's yud tfachim in height? Yud tfachim in height means the next koma, the next, how do you say koma in English? A floor, a story, thank you. Good English. Yud tfachim is the shir of sukkah. Yud tfachim is the shir of bayis for mezuzah. Ad hashamayim, there's always a difference. Vayered Elohim al har Sinai. Lemala me yud tfachim. The Gemara is very insistent. But in Tefillah, ka'omed b'shamayim, omed lifnei hamelech. It's a metaphysical miracle that when you daven, you're transported. Your physical body is transported metaphysically. Ke'ilu. Obviously, my body is still here, but ke'ilu, person is now, in terms of his actual nochachut lifnei Hashem, he's omed lifnei hamelech. And why is that? Because Tefillah isn't to appeal to God. It's not only to appeal to God. It's not only that I have a problem, God will hear. If you have a problem, God will hear. That's true. But Tefillah is avodas Hashem. We have to think like medieval people. Because I know that all of you have bad educations. Therefore, I know you've all seen movies. Medieval kingship, the court. There's a court. Medieval, Kolshake in the ancient times, Roman times. The king sits on a throne, and then there are courtiers, sarim, omdim, Melachim omdim imah, Srafim omdim imah. There were courtiers surrounding the king, and then someone comes in, there's a mishlachat, there's a delegation. The king of Spain sends a delegation to the king of England. So there's this whole thing, they blow in trumpets, and then the delegation comes in, and they bow down in the beginning. They walk 3 steps forward, they bow down in the beginning, and they present their petitions before the king. It's a very formal thing. It's what we call, there's an English word which no one ever uses anymore. But I assume you've read, well, maybe not. Once upon a time we read books. It's called an audience. You have an audience with the king. You don't take a teal with the king. It's not a walk in the garden. It's an audience for the king. That's tefillah. But it's omei lifnei hamelech. It's a schus. Not everybody gets invited. To get invited to see the king on a given month, there's a special invitation that comes. We get invited 3 times a day because we're avdei hamelech, because we're sarei hamelech. We're part of the king's court. But you're invited to go there. You're not invited to talk to the king. You could send an email. You could send a telegram. You could call him on the phone. But no, you're invited to be omei lifnei hamelech, with the shavetet hamelech haidei zeh, that we present before him our petitions, our needs, and our shevach and our hodaya. That's what happens 3 times a day. Omei lifnei hamelech. You're transported to another world. That's why, I mean, the Rambam is just accumulating halachas here, but they go together. Yeah, together with that is the einav lemata. Isn't it obvious? If I was asked to speak to the king of the world, and I was invited to his court when I would go in, so I would omeid zakuf. I would really stand up straight. My komad zakif tvei mali. The more it's a great honor. But einav lamata, because you're standing, the distance, the distinction between us hasn't been limited. It's still, you're meeting the melech malchei amlachim, and you're lamata. So einav lamata, avalibo lamala. It sounds paradoxical, but it's habaha, that we as avdei Hashem, eved literally, servants. Slaves is the more literal translation, just it's hard to use that word today. The servants of God stand before him. That's only true in royal courts. Otherwise, you'd have to stand a mile away. But the royal court is based on the king surrounded, dafka, with avadim. So the royal court of God is anachnu avdei Hashem. But davening is an experience of being transported, being entered into. It's not just an opportunity for God to hear you. It's you, amazingly enough, 3 times a day, you're invited to come before the Melech and produce his malchus, encourage his malchus, increase his malchus. Because malchus Hashem is avdei Hashem mamlichim oto ala olam. Ve'ech mamlichim oto? We go into his royal court and we say, Ata malkeinu, Ata adonenu, Ata elokeinu, and therefore we work together. Therefore we have certain needs. Therefore we have certain bakashot. Therefore we have certain shvachim. We have to be moda ala ova, mevakesh ala asid, because this is Malchut Hashem Ba'olam. All the questions which we asked in 4th grade, and 5th grade, and 6th grade, and 9th grade about how can you daven 3 times a day, it gets boring after a while. How can you repeat the same things? Are all, I would say, answered. The beginning of the answer, you have to understand it deeply. By this point, you're going to daven because Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Halavai sheyispal Adam kol hayom kulo. Rabbi Yochanan learned most of the day, but nonetheless he said, Halavai sheyispal Adam kol hayom kulo, because Malchus Hashem is created by our tefillah, not because we ask Hashem to be Melech, because we are Mamlichei Hashem. We're creating the royal court Bashamayim, but our feet are still on the ground. What was the pasuk? I'll answer the kasha that I alluded to in the beginning. What's the connection between V'haya Eidi V'libi Sham Kol Hayamim? God says, I look at the Beis HaMikdash. Okay, why does that mean that I should be looking at the ground? Even if I'm in Chutz La'aretz, I look, it's not Nochach HaMikdash, it's not davening towards the Beis HaMikdash, it's your eyes face down. Your face is towards the Beis HaMikdash, but your eyes should look down. Why? Because Eini V'libi Sham Kol Hayamim. What the pasuk is saying is that God says, I care about the world. Malchus Hashem Bashamayim doesn't need us. Srafim omdim mima'alo. The Shamayim is pure Malchus, but it's Shamayim. It's fake Malchus. It's Malchus that God rages for himself, and it's not connected to any Makom HaMalucha. It's God by himself. The Malachim are expressions of his Malchus. The Eini V'li Bisham Kol Hayamim, Kadosh Baruch Hu says, my matara, my aim in the world, my aim for the world is to be Melech Al Olam. I have plans. I want to conquer the world. God is an imperialist. He made the world so that the world should be Malchusa. So God's interest is in the world, but Hu Bashamayim. So we should be looking at the world because our interest, our matava is that the world should be Malchus Hashem. And how do we do that in the terms of tefillah, not the rest of the day, is Libo Bashamayim, Libo is lifnei hamelech, the omed lifnei hamelech, but you're still looking, you're saying, what am I interested in? What am I concerned about? What do I want to ask about? Is sheyeh malchuto tikon le'ot b'mehera b'teferet u'zech, which is why we end davening 3 times a day. Admittedly, not Dina de Gemara, but Dina Shal Klal Yisrael, for already close to 1,000 years, since the Middle Ages, spread to all of Klal Yisrael. We end the day after we daven, we point out what we just did. Ha'kein nekaveh l'rot mehera b'teferet u'zecha, d'avir gulim min haaretz, v'elim karot yikaritun, l'takein olam b'malchut shakai. L'takein olam b'malchut shakai. To do that, we ourselves have to be the bridge between Shamayim v'aretz. And the bridge between Shamayim v'aretz is that Einav lemata, we maintain our parochial interest, our mundane interest. Sometimes if you read, sometimes in Chassidus, sometimes other things, Jews were embarrassed or they felt it was incorrect to daven about our food, to daven about this building, to daven about even peace and war. You involve them with Hashem. We should talk about metaphysics. We should talk about Gadlut Hashem, about Olam, about the spheres. In Kabbalah, you talk about the spheres. The din of Tefilla is Einav lemata. I make a list. I look to see what to daven on. Where do you look? Lemata. You look at the earth, because that's what Kosh Baruch Hu is interested in. Doesn't need you to tell him that he's 7 spheres, 10 spheres, bina v'chulo. God needs us to tell him that we're going to continue his work ba'aretz. That's Einav lemata. So my interests are parochial, are mundane, are simple, are individual, and are even self-centered. They're my interests, my real interests, the interests of Klal Yisrael, the interests of God in the world. But you do it not from afar. It's not za'aka b'shas tzara. It's not that, oh, the world is terrible, come save us. We do that also. That's kol tachman. But tefillah is that we've been invited from the provinces. We've been invited to come to the Merkaz HaMalchut, and we go there. When you're transformed. How are you transformed? You take 3 steps forward. It's true that most Rishonim think you don't need to take 3 steps forward. It's only Rashi in one of the halacha books of Talmidei Rashi, the Naora, I think it's in Sefer Ora. So you should take 3 steps forward. It was an invention which everybody does today. We know it's true because you take 3 steps backwards. That's the Gemara already. You take 3 steps forward. You say Hashem sfatai tiftach ufi agiti latecha. What do you need help? What do you need help in order to say? In order to daven? You don't need help to go into daven. I know how to daven. I say what's bothering me. Okay, the Rambam midiraisa. You don't even need the words of Chazal. Hashem sfatai tiftach ufi agiti latecha, because I'm omeid achshav bashamayim. I'm struck dumb. When I see the king, I'm in front of the king. Et Pnei Hashem. Avraham Avinu was et Pnei Hashem. I'm struck dumb. As Hashem sfatai tiftach ufi agiti latecha, that creates metaphysically the status of Omed Lifnei HaMelech B'Shamayim. I'm a low-level courtier who's been granted an audience with the king of the world. When I finish, I say, is, okay, I'm leaving now. So there should be ratzon. This meeting should find favor. There's no way to say it in English. Should have grace and favor. Ratzon Lifnei Hashem. And in the middle, you say what the concerns of the world are. You can say what the concerns of a Yid are, because God not just listens and hears it, but it's presented before him. It becomes his interest. God wants a doch. He wants a report. What's doing in the world, and we're the ones who have the responsibility to say that. This has amazing hashlochot, which each person has to do it on his own. And it's obvious what the general direction is. But you're omed lifnei hamelech. Your feet are on earth, but libo is not on earth anymore. As soon as you take those 3 steps forward and you say Hashem sfatai tiftach, so libo has been transported to the heights of heaven, to the place where the Kosh Baruch Hu is legamrei shalem, where there are no other problems, but you're bringing your problems, you're bringing the world, you're bringing the interests and the concerns of the world up lifnei hamelech. The Gemara says, Medrash Rashi, I think Rashi quotes it, maybe not, maybe it's only the Medrash. The distance between Shamayim and Aretz is mahalach 500 shana. That's the way Chazal said infinity. You're walking at a normal rate, it'll take you 500 years. It's in the pasuk of the Migdal Bavel. How tall would Migdal Bavel have to be to reach Vashamayim, Vashav Vashamayim? So the Medrash says it's mahalach 500 shana. There's no word for infinity in Hebrew. It's a Greek concept. So that's the way Chazal say infinity. And you're in a second. You just take 3 steps and boom, You're there. Since you all watch ridiculous movies, so you know how that takes place. You pass through a portal and you're in another world. I don't know how Chazal understood it. They just imagined it. But we know it can be done if you read the wrong kinds of books, or if you read the right kinds of books in quantum physics. You do it. You walk through this portal and you're there. You're Bashamayim. Who wouldn't be shaking when he said the word Baruch? The first thing you do is, what's the first thing you do? The first thing you do is you bow, because you all of a sudden find yourself in another place. You go through all of Tefilla, it's there the whole time. This feeling, this it's not the tochen, it's not the content of Tefilla, but it's the situation, it's the reka, it's the English is a very difficult language. It's my third language. It's where you are, right? You're putting other content in, but where you are is b'malchut Hashem, in the court, the royal court, L'Akadosh Baruch Hu b'Shamayim, in his real capital, where he comes from, where he lives, where he stays, and influences the world, and you've been magically transported to that place. All of Tefillah should be infused, has to be infused with this, or else you're not davening, or else you're just petitioning. Za'aka. You can do that sometimes. Za'aka isn't done by Amida. How is Za'aka done? If you had to choose, first it is in tremendous distress. What should be his bodily position when he davens? When he prays? What? Collapse. Of course. The woman who comes to Elisha because her son has died, as nofelet l'raglav, and holds onto his feet, onto the edges of his beged, of his robe. That's how you petition when you're desperate. So we call nefilas apayim. It's after tefillah. When you finish, you say, the truth is, I go back to the earth, and I still have a few things to say. So you'll say nefilat apayim. You're helpless, but the courtier of the king isn't helpless. He's one of the servants of the king. He performs the king's things. If he was helpless, why would the king need him? The king wants avadim because they're powerful, but they're avdei Hashem. They're powerful, and their power is in the service of God. That is a dafka amida yeshara. Kol ma dezake finish, but a person strengthens himself and stands more upright. I have the honor of being the slave, the worthless slave of God. That's my honor. Azu zakif tvei. Everyone should work out in his own mind 2 minutes before you daven. What that means specifically for today, for this particular tefillah, you're about to go on an instant voyage to another world. To the world, everything is tov, everything is beautiful, everything is fine, everything is gvaldik, everything is malchus Hashem. And you're coming from this world to say, the outer provinces of God's malchus, we're in charge of. But the purpose is malchus Hashem, and therefore I have the zchut and the honor of being omed lifnei HaMelech u'mitpalel.